For this Blueprint collaboration interview at Harper, we're talking to the co-founder of a practice that was actually born from a collaborative architecture and landscape workshop. Although known for their collaborative working practices, today's interviewee doesn't actually like the word collaboration, preferring interaction. Today we're talking to Craig Dykers of Snøhetta.
Interestingly, we shy away from the word collaboration. It's sometimes overused. For many people, it's simply placing a bunch of people around a table with different interests and having each one express their interest to the remainder of the table. We find that notion of collaboration very limiting. We think of collaboration in a more energetic way, so we sometimes use the word interaction instead of collaboration. It's about engaging with people, it's about changing roles, playing roles, interacting in physical ways, and that's very important. Sometimes we say, if you are only thinking with your mind, you're not really thinking. You also have to think with your entire body. So the physical act of producing things is a kind of interaction that we appreciate in our studio. We also look at creating sometimes a sense of doubt within ourselves by placing ourselves in situations in a collaborative environment where we might be uneasy or unaware of all of the context and conditions of a conversation. So it's about opening up world and opening up your mind rather than delivering what you know. If you're only delivering what you know, then you don't somehow grow within that. Normally when we begin a project, we try to build a team up which already internally is mixed, because we're architects, landscape architects, interior architects, and branding and graphic designers, all situated in one studio without silos. So there are no barriers between these people. We sit side by side. We try as much as possible to bring people into the dialogue that are not the traditional proponents of design. If we can talk to a psychologist or an anthropologist, certainly an artist. And art is a form of design, but it's not design. So the artist's mind helps us see our work in a very different way. There are a number of artists that we work with, including Bjarne Melgaard, a great Norwegian artist of international stature, who collaborated with us, worked together with us on the House to Die in project. Another artist we've been working quite a lot with is Jose Parla, a Cuban-American artist in the United States, and quite some few others. And essentially what occurs is that we are able to interact with these artists, understand their viewpoint, they understand ours, and we build something together in a very direct way. It's important to remember that the worldview of an artist is something very different than the worldview of an architect. To an architect, the world is something that we have to manage. So even asking the question of why we're doing something is a programmatic element of our work. We don't see it as a philosophical question or an artistic expression. We see it as something that we are working together with. When we recently worked on the library for President Obama, it was a competition that we were involved in. We brought in librarians, but we also brought in authors, we brought in politicians, artists, kids off the street, everybody. We were just talking to them the whole time. We made a wonderful set of films for that process where we stood outside in south side of Chicago, which isn't a particularly always safe place, and dressed like architects, looking a little bit out of place, and just asked people, what are the things that make them happy? What makes you happy? One question. And then we recorded everybody's answer, and the range of answers was just truly beautiful. A simple question like that, it really connects you to something in a direct way. In fact, we played a game with President Obama in the Oval Office with him. It was quite fun. When we proposed to play a game, because we play a lot of games, we develop a lot of different games to get people to speak. His answers were truly profound, and it was funny when we started the process. We we said, we're going to play a game, and there were only 2 other people in the room, and they were advisors, and they went into shock, like, well, you can't play a game with the president. And of course he said, yeah, I love games. And transpositioning is an idea where people can take the role of another, to stand in their shoes, to sit in their chair, and be that person's world, and try to express yourself in the way that they might try to themselves. And transpositioning is a kind of movement from one place to another within the context of a discussion. This allows us, in a very direct way, to pick at our brains and see where the loose bits are and see where the solid bits and the overlaps are, where things come together. And that can occur outside the office as well, where we sit with the client or with others on the users of the building, try to understand and be who they are. Sometimes we will actually play as if we are the user of a building and walk through a trip to that place and what it is that we're looking for. There was a great story recently about the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, where when we began that project, we said, if we complete this building and can see people kissing in it, that will be a sign of success. Because sometimes when you go to a museum, you have just such a relaxed and remarkably intimate feeling that you feel completely natural kissing whoever you're with. And if that is a way of seeing your visit, then that could be a good memory. At Times Square in New York City, which was a substantial change to an existing urban context, we watched people for days and weeks and months, and we saw the irrationality of life. And we started to see how people moved in a way through cities in a focused environment that is almost impossible in any other place besides Times Square. There are 43 million people a year funneling through the narrowest of urban spaces with tall buildings and bright lights everywhere. So to a certain degree, that level of urbanity turns you into a wild creature. You're no longer civilized. You're moving like a dog might move through a wolf might move through the forest. There's a different way of approaching things. So we learned quite a lot. For example, you would think that in these very tight conditions, you should clear everything out and just make it as open as possible. But humans don't really connect to open, featureless places, even if they're tight. So we learned actually by looking at the information kiosk in Grand Central Station, which is in the center of the great ticketing hall, how people maneuvered around that kiosk, and that actually removed the burden of having to bump into people in the center of the room. The kiosk was the common problem that everyone shared. And when you share a common problem, as we've seen in times of terrorist acts, you connect to other people in a very direct way. Problems and challenges help us build linkage to one another, as well as joys and wonderfully lovely experiences help us connect. So in Times Square, we placed smaller benches that people had to maneuver around, and that dissolved the issue of crossing paths. I would say finally the notion of transpositioning allows you to transposition within yourself, because you're always having different little voices in your head. There's the smart voice and the intelligent one, and there's the crazy radical one. And we're moving continuously between these two worlds of the predictable and the intuitive. That's the modern dilemma. We try to find the balance between what we see as chaos and what we think is order. I feel, are straddling both worlds. I like to say that at Snøhetta, we're kind of fleshy architects. We're not so interested in which route to follow, so long as it feels good on your skin. Generally speaking, we try to work with the larger team as early as possible. Of course, fees and contracts and other things often get in the way. So as much interaction as possible is what we try to build into the process. That doesn't negate the fact that sometimes you sit alone and work with your own thoughts, or smaller teams, but expanding that notion of creativity to larger groups as quickly as possible is something we prefer to do. Most of our team members would probably say they're accustomed to working with us in a very direct way. We use a kind of a language that is not overly problematic. So we tend to leave the isms to the side. We tend to leave all of the theoretical terminology to more personal conversations and not to wider conversations, so that we all find a common thread as to how we can express ourselves. You could extend that same idea to the general public. Designers sometimes lose their way and create a language that builds walls between the world, the general world around us and our professions. So bringing those walls down is an important part of how we talk, and even when a consultant or a team member comes in later, we're still talking in such a way that there's possibility to build the project together in a very useful manner.